Hey everyone, this is Spacetown again with another talking video. One thing that I have wanted to do a video on for a little bit is things to pair the M8 with. So I've had a theme with the last few videos I've made with the M8, and that theme is how well the M8 plays with other gear. So I have made videos of the M8 with the quadranted swarm. I've made videos of the M8 with this little guy here, the peripy destroyer. But today I'm going to make a video about the M8 and Korg's NTS-1. With those other videos, right, with the quadranted swarm and with the peripy destroyer, I didn't really do much interfacing between the two pieces of gear. There wasn't much communication going on between the M8 and the quadranted, or the M8 and the peripy, outside of a synchronization pulse, right? That's because both the quadranted and the peripy both have built-in sequencers and both have a very distinct sonic character that can be accessed using the knobs on the device itself. The NTS-1 is a very special case in this regard. And so if you wanted me to recommend a device that you want to pair the M8 with, that is a sound source and that can have its capabilities unlocked by the power of the M8, I would say that the NTS-1 is a very great option for doing so. The first big reason that I like the NTS-1 and the M8 together is that they're both tiny and they're both portable. The M8 has a battery inside it, and the NTS-1 can be powered with just a normal portable charger. So you can take this anywhere, and that's kind of one of the big themes with the way I like to perform. I don't like to have this big thing that I can only work with at home, so I like to be able to bring all my stuff that I'm working with wherever I want. And so the fact that they're both so small and portable is already a big plus in this regard. That is one of the big reasons I think they work well together. They have a similar footprint, and the power needs on both of them are pretty similar. So you don't need to carry a bunch of extra stuff in order to get these to pair well together. Even with like the quadranted swarm, that requires external power, which means I need to carry a power brick, or a power source, which means I need to have an outlet nearby, and so that kind of limits what I can do, right? So if I wanted to bring this setup on like a train or a plane or something, it's a pretty easy way to do so. The main reason, and the reasons that I want to go into today, have to do with the NTS-1's strengths and the NTS-1's weaknesses, because it has very, very strong strengths and it has some pretty debilitating weaknesses in this device. So this isn't going to be a review of the Korg NTS-1, but I do want to go over what I think are its strengths and weaknesses when it comes to both performance and sound design and song composition, because I think that the M8 handles whatever weaknesses that the NTS-1 has really well. So the first big strength of the NTS is that its sound design capabilities and its synth engine is just monstrous. It's actually, for the size, for this time, it's even smaller than the M8, right? If you just kind of put it on top, right? It's tiny. It's a very tiny thing, but because it's using the same sound engines that are found in, I think, the mini log and the big mini log, I don't remember what it's called, you have some very, very extreme sound design capabilities. And it's one of the few synths that sounds really good just out of the box, right? So even if I just even if I just mess around with the saw wave, right? Just a single twist of the knob turns this into something really, really cool, right? The filters it has a bunch of filter modes, and the filters sound nice as well. Resonance, it just sounds good. There's just a lot of cool, really big, powerful sounds that can come out of a tiny device like this. In addition to that, you can modulate a lot of these oscillators and the filter using LFOs and different envelopes. So using the filter sub menus, right, you get the ability to change the sound in a pretty significant way. So that's cool, right? You already get a really nice big sound from this. It sounds really good out of the box, and this is, I know there's nothing, it's going into the M8, but the M8 has nothing on the input, right? So there's no chorus, no delay, no reverb on the input. So this is basically raw. And in addition to all of this modulation that you can do on the oscillator and the filter, you also get these really, really nice effects on the M8, or I mean on the NTS-1. So you have this mod which gives you the ability to have choruses, flangers. Right, so you get a really nice chorus effects just on its own. You get a nice delay, so with a lot of cool interest there. And the reverbs I like the most. I'm a big fan of reverbs. You get some really cool reverbs here. The submarine one is really nice. So submarine is really cool, and then the riser is also really nice. Almost kind of like a shimmer reverb kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, the NTS-1 has a lot of really, really powerful sound design just within this box in and of itself. So that's one of the main strengths, is that there's a lot of sound design capability just within the oscillator. The filter is really nice, and the effects that you get are really cool as well, all in this little box. One of the strengths of this device is actually how performative you can get with the limited capabilities of the device itself, right? So I would not say that sequencing is a strength on here. It doesn't have a sequencer, it only has an arpeggiator. I'll get rid of that reverb so it doesn't blow everything up. So you do have an arpeggiator, right? And you can get it to latch, right? So that is one of the ways that you can just keep something going, right? Keep something going on the NTS-1. And the arpeggiator in and of itself is fine. It doesn't really, it's cool, it's nice, but I wouldn't use the arpeggiator as my main way of performing with the NTS-1, right? But if we just kind of, let it go and stuff. Oop. Right. What we can do, the actual performance stuff that you can do with the arpeggiator is really nice, right? You can adjust a lot of different things with the knobs, and the layout of the device is fairly intuitive. So if you need to do really quick changes and mess around with things really quickly, you can do so. So the knobs themselves are actually really nice to play around with, and the layout of all of the different functionalities that you have on the NTS-1 is really nice and intuitive. It's just that there's a lot more that you could be accessing inside the device that you just don't really have quick access to unless you're pairing it with something else. So those are the strengths, right? It's the just the massive sound design capabilities of the unit itself, the really good effects that you have, and the device is laid out in a way where the limited functionality that you do have with the knobs works out well for performance if you're trying to use it like as a live performance tool. However, right, those are the strengths. However, it has some very, very big weaknesses, which is why it might have put some people off at the beginning. First weakness is obviously the sequencing capabilities. You don't have any. You basically have the arpeggiator and the latch functionality on the arpeggiator, and that's basically it. You can't really do anything else with it. Normally that wouldn't be a big deal if you had any kind of keyboard or any kind of way to play the device outside of just this ribbon cable, but in the box itself, just standalone, the ribbon cable isn't really going to cut it. Like I can barely hit the same note twice with the ribbon cable. Right, you can see it going from C sharp to C, or from C to C sharp. Just kind of, I'm not moving my finger that much, right? And it's really hard. It's monophonic, which means that if you make a mistake, it's just going to override what you were doing before because it's cutting off the previous voice and just replacing it with the one that you pushed, right? So if I want to like, it's just not ideal for performing. You would think that because there's only this ribbon cable here to play with, Korg would be able to put a sequencer in here, standalone, just in the box itself, but there is no sequencer. So as anything more than just kind of like a fun toy to play around with, standalone, it's not really, it's not super interesting, right? All you have is this ribbon cable and the arpeggiator with a latch function, which is a problem because the synth engines are so powerful here. You want the ability to make interesting patterns, make interesting note changes and all that stuff, but you don't have that standalone. That's one of the biggest weaknesses with the NTS-1 is the lack of sequencing and the lack of consistent note input that you have with this thing. The second weakness of the NTS-1 is that there is no preset storage. When you turn it off and turn it back on again, nothing is stored. So you can come up with a really cool patch in the device itself, and then when you turn it off, you have to recreate that patch all over again when you turn it on. Normally, if you're just using these, just everything, the base menus, it's not a problem, right? Because it's annoying to have to find the oscillator type and get the shape value to where you want it, the filter value to where you want it, all that stuff. If it were just these base menus, that wouldn't be a problem. However, so much of the capability of this device comes from the submenus that happen when you hold on to each button and then adjust it here, right? So not only do you have to remember the values that you had for the shape and the alt values, you also have to remember what LFO settings you had, what you were routing that LFO to, how much that LFO was affecting the shape or the pitch, and then you have to remember that with basically all of these different functions. So because of that shift function workflow and the fact that there are so many sweet spots within the Korg that within the NTS-1 that you want to remember, the lack of presets becomes a little bit of a problem. So those are the main weaknesses of the NTS-1, is the lack of sequencer and the lack of consistent note input and the lack of presets. The M8 here is a perfect companion to the Korg because not only does it solve all of the weaknesses that the Korg, the NTS-1 has, it does so in a way that allows you to take both of them around and actually use them in a portable way. So again, big weaknesses of the Korg is lack of sequencer, which is solved using the M8's MIDI functionality. So, you can go in and make a MIDI instrument in the M8 and use that MIDI instrument to sequence the Korg, right? So I have a kind of little pattern here that I've been messing around with on the M8. Right? So the fact that you can sequence this externally from the M8 and take both of them around and do things, it covers one of the biggest weaknesses that the NTS has from the M8 side. The other weakness that we talked about was the preset, right? And so the M8 actually, because of the fact that it has not just the ability to sequence MIDI notes, but that you can sequence MIDI CC, and not only can you sequence the MIDI CC, you can save this entire thing as an instrument that you can recall whenever you want. Those three aspects of the M8 essentially turn the M8 into a preset storage solution for the NTS-1, which is really, really cool. The only issue is that if I'm gonna try and do some sort of scrolly effect thing with the NTS-1 implementation, the MIDI implementation on the screen right now. The problem with combining the M8 and the NTS-1 as far as a preset storage solution is that there are too many control change parameters, too many CC values for the M8 to store. The M8 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 CCs that it can store as a MIDI instrument. And the NTS-1 has more than that as far as MIDI, as far as parameters that I'd like to change on the NTS-1. So the problem now becomes, what do I want to take from the NTS-1 and store on the M8, right? The answer to that is essentially all of these shift functions, right? All of the functions that are that are handled by holding down on the button and adjusting the value like that. So this is my instrument right now. I am calling it the NTS Angry Bass. I don't know why it's so angry. And so we have a bunch of CC values that are already stored on here, and a bunch of default values that will be sent to the NTS when this instrument is triggered. I'm going to go through each of these really quickly. These first two are the oscillator, actually it's these first three, CC 53, 54, and 55. These three are the oscillator type, the shape, and the alt. So basically everything here. You might be asking, well, didn't you just say that you only want to store stuff that requires a shift menu function to change? And the reason that I want to store the oscillator type, shape, and value onto the instrument in the M8 is mainly because I think that these kind of define what the instrument is, right? Without these values, right, without the oscillator type or the shape or the alt value, you don't really have a preset, right? You don't really have an instrument. You just have a series of parameters that get stored here. So let's say if I want to switch from this instrument to another instrument in the same song, and I do that, I still have to do, go into the oscillator function or go into the oscillator menu, switch my oscillator to what it needs to be, and then, switch the shape and the alt to those respective values. And it creates a situation in which I have to, on the fly, remember all of the stuff that I don't want to remember. So having it stored in the preset is a really useful way to just get rid of all of that situation and have it stored. So oscillator type, oscillator shape, oscillator alt, essentially. The next two values that I have are the oscillator LFO rate and the LFO depth. which gives the oscillator a lot of the oomph that I like in my tones, right? So I have these set to whatever the values are. You don't really need to worry about it. It's just to demonstrate that they exist, right? And so with the next three values, I have my filter type, and then I have my filter sweep depth and the rate. I like to have my filters with like a cutoff on an envelope that's controlling the cutoff like most of the time. I just like the way that sounds. This is my main preset for the Korg. And so what you'll notice is that it leaves the filter cutoff unchanged, which means I get to do this, right? I'm performing with this, right? It also leaves the attack and the release values of the envelope generator untouched. It also leaves the reverb untouched because the reverb is really, it's pretty intuitive, right? And if you know what order your reverbs are in, you can just zoom right to the submarine or the riser, which are my favorite, do the stuff here, and then turn it off when you need to. It's possible that you might have different needs for what you want to store in the NTS or in the M8 from the NTS-1, and that's totally fine. This is just an example of what I use when I am creating a preset for my for the NTS-1, and the way I structure my preset is I just like to have a number of things that I can sit and perform with, right? If you aren't so concerned with performing, then you might actually want to store the cutoff frequency, or you might want to store the reverb setting or the reverb type or whatever. This is just the way I do it. And the main thing I want to demonstrate is how powerful it is to have preset storage on the NTS-1 in the M8. So let's play this out, right? So before, this is my chain without any of that set, with the blank instrument. So okay, so let's go into the instrument, right? So I had, I'm going to do essentially a raw boot up here, right? So I'm going to turn off the NTS, turn it back on. And I'm going to be sending the instrument values I have from my instrument 00 to the NTS-1, sequencing it. You might be wondering, oops, I had it turned down. So you might be saying, well, that just sounds like the raw saw wave from the NTS-1. And in that case, you would be right. It's just the raw saw wave. And, why do all of this stuff if it isn't actually sending any of these values to the NTS-1? I don't actually know why it does that. I don't know why the M8 is... it might be something with the M8 sending the CC values in a different order or whatever. Fact is, from a raw boot up, this functionality, the MIDI instrument with the CC and the default values, does not work. However, there's a very easy solution to this, and it involves essentially taking this instrument, right, this instrument 00, and just copying it over to a different instrument. So instrument 2 is basically the same as instrument 1. It's the same. I literally took the saved instrument that I had and reloaded it into instrument 2. And so we have the raw saw wave, right? If we just take one of these instrument values, send it over to instrument 2, and then send it back over to instrument 0, right? Now we have all of those values working, being sent from the M8 to the NTS-1. And I don't know why it works that way, but that's what I have figured out for me, and so hopefully that works for you too. And once that happens, you don't need to worry about the values stored within here working on the NTS-1 until you reboot by unplugging and replugging it back in. There might be values that you don't have listed in your preset, right, in your MIDI instrument. So if you do need those values changed and sent to the NTS-1 from the instrument, you will have to repeat this process with the instrument that you actually want, right? So let's say that there's a I don't know, value 64 or something that you want to send from the M8 to the NTS-1. What that would require is for you to do the same process with an instrument that has the CC value 64 placed in it with a value, and then you just kind of send that value to the NTS-1, and then when you come back to it, it will work correctly. And an alternative way to do this is to literally just take this instrument and do this with it, right, while it's playing. Right, so you take the instrument and you take each CC value and just like change it very slightly so that the M8 knows that it's sending those CC values over to the NTS-1. Again, no idea why it works this way. I think it's just some quirk of either the NTS-1 receiving the MIDI or the M8 sending the MIDI, but that's just how it works for me. Now that we have this preset set up, right? Now I can be very performative with the NTS-1, right? And what I can do is, structure my song so that it has, I have like a easy drum beat here, right? So cool. So then, right? Cool. So that's the cool thing about having your instrument storage in here, is that you can pick and choose what you actually want to save and what you want to perform. And then you just leave that stuff to the NTS-1 where you do have knobs, right? And you do have the ability to change that stuff on the fly. And the other cool thing about it is that you can create and you can actually do live instrument changes on the NTS-1 without having to do all of the menu diving that involves. So if I take what I was playing before, right, and then I suddenly want to switch it, and that's pretty much it. Hopefully this helps you a little bit in how to pair external gear with the M8. I didn't mean for this to be so NTS centric. The NTS-1 is a great companion device for the M8, but a lot of what makes the M8 so good as a instrument to me is its ability to kind of pair with anything, right? With the MIDI learn that it has on here, with the MIDI sequencing capabilities, with the ability to play with other instruments' outputs into its own internal inputs. The M8 just pairs really well with basically any single instrument or any piece of synth gear. And so I feel like it pairs particularly well with the NTS, and so I wanted to give you a little bit of a demonstration as to why that is. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see ya.